All right, guys, so I just got done watching the George Benson interview with Rick Beato for the second time, actually. And I'm going to share with you some of the takeaways that I learned, as well as some of the guitar lessons. My name's Chase Maddox. I'm a jazz guitarist and online educator based out of Miami, Florida. I've done a bunch of videos on Benson as well here on my YouTube channel that you can check out afterward. But let's dive into some of the insights that Benson shares in this interview. So starting off this interview, let's jump over to...
What's going on at your house? What kind of music did your parents listen to? And how did you get into music at an early age?
It is quite a story.
Okay, so Benson spends a lot of time up front on this interview on his stories from his life. And they're amazing, entertaining stories that you should really just hear from Benson. I'm going to skip a lot of those parts. Really what I want to get into today is the things we can learn and apply to our own guitar playing. So we're going to skip ahead and get to some of those types of ideas.
Jack McDuff. So you did the record with him in 1964. Would Jack's playing, would he say, oh, over this change, you can do this kind of thing?
No.
Or did you just play this stuff by ear?
It was all ears. At first, Jack was mesmerized by that.
Okay, so one of the main points that Benson kind of reiterates throughout this, and Beato comes at it with different angles to try and get some more detail from Benson about his approach to playing. He does this a few times throughout the interview. And Benson keeps going back to these stories about different guitarists. And now, the first time I was listening through this, I was kind of disappointed, not from Beato, but because Benson was not really giving an answer, it seemed like. It was like he was almost avoiding the question, but he wasn't giving that impression. He was just talking about all the different guitarists that he had played with. And in listening to this for another time now, what I'm realizing is that's actually Benson's answer. Is he played with so many of these great guitarists in person. He talks about a whole bunch from Jim Hall, Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, Larry Coryell, Barney Kessel, Tal Farlow, like literally all of the greats of the time on jazz guitar. And so that was actually where his education came from. And they're not things that he can easily impart to someone else. It's not like he learned it from a book, or he can say, hey, I learned this specific scale and that transformed my playing. It's literally just decades of absorbing this information from these people and from those records. So it's not an answer that we might want to hear, but that's actually the true answer of how he's developing all of this sophisticated ideas from what he's explaining in the story is just his interactions with these guys in person and listening to them. So let's jump to him actually talking about that. And he says it right around here at minute 21 in this interview. So check out what he's saying in this.
Oh, it's Barney. He came in. Yeah, I heard that thing you were doing. Look, you ever think about trying it like this? Sure enough, he showed us how it's supposed to be played.
See, that's
So
what he's
George,
talking
you
about.
jammed with other guitar players a lot.
I listened. When they thought I was jamming with them, I was listening.
Yeah, so let's just stop that for a second. When they thought I was jamming with them, I was listening. And so that seemed to be like his approach with all of these different stories he's talking about. He was just listening and learning from these guys directly. I think the lesson for us is a lot of times we can focus maybe too much on learning from books and different things like that, when really, as much as possible, we need to try and learn this from players, from teachers directly, and not so much from a book or something related like that. Now, after this point, Beato starts playing some of Benson's records for him. And that's kind of interesting too, to hear what Benson thinks about those and just kind of reminiscing those and his own personal take on some of these classic recordings. So let's skip to the first one, which is them going over Affirmation, which is actually one of the first Benson tunes. Probably, it was the first Benson tune that I learned.
This is off your Breezin record. This is...
Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts about that affirmation where he goes just like incredibly smoothly. It's really crazy.
When I play this for you, do you remember this? Does it take you back to that time period?
Like it was yesterday.
Yeah, so here's really cool. Benson reminisces on this record and everything that has to do with the album, the personnel, how he met all these guys. Super interesting, like biographical detail stuff. Let's take a listen now to when Beato plays his song Breezin for him from the same record. And one of the things I thought that was really funny was that Benson didn't like the song Breezin because it was too simple for him.
For two reasons. First of all, I liked Good Boys Album's version. And the second was that the melody was so simple. It's like, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
Yeah, see, even there, when Benson's singing that, right, he hasn't even touched the guitar. I don't know if he has perfect pitch per se, but he in a sense, he probably does because his singing, and even when he just sang that, he's singing it in the same key as Breezin, which is the key of D. So just right off the bat there, even just the way he sang through that solfege, you can tell that Benson, his ear is just like at another level. But it's funny to hear him say that he didn't like Breezin since that's one of his most popular tunes, you know? And also, like he mentioned, it wasn't originally his tune, it's a Gawarzabo tune. One other thing I want to go back to is Benson talking about what he learned from Wes Montgomery. And this is interesting, and they kind of skip over it in the interview because they're not really touching the guitars or playing anything here. But I want to go through it with you guys just so you can kind of learn something real quick from what Benson's talking about. And this is Benson talking about what he learned from Wes Montgomery's octaves and how he innovated on that idea. So this is right around minute 22.
If you already know it, you ain't gonna learn nothing.
If you're listening to something like a Wes Montgomery record, Boss Guitar, whatever, could you tell what Wes was playing? Fried pies, the chord solos, things like that. Could you hear them and you'd be like, I know those voicings. I know what that is.
I knew about maybe 10% of what he was playing. I had to find out what he was trying to get over. What was the main message? What was he trying to say to the public? You know, and could I say it differently? I found out that I could say it differently. Oh, I wonder why he never added this note to his octaves. Well, this is pretty. I wonder why Wes never thought of that. I can do something we even Wes Montgomery can't do. And Creed Taylor told.
Okay, so then he goes off into a whole nother story, but they don't actually talk about what that is. So if you don't know, Wes is known for playing these octaves, right? So an octave, we have a note, in this case, let's say D, and then the octave up D, the higher D. What Benson innovated on, what he's kind of known for with these octaves, is adding a note in between. I think about this like on his tune, Give Me the Night, because we have like, we could play like an octave here with the Fs, and then add the fifth in between, the C. This is one shape that Benson likes doing that. He also sometimes would add the fourth in between instead of the fifth, so like F, B flat, F. And he uses these a lot in parts of his solos where he would go into soloing with octaves. And you can get a really cool bluesy sound on that. So say you're on like B flat minor, you might use this F, B flat, move it down to E flat and A flats, or you could even do the E flat, B flat. So you have like a, also on different strings, so B flat, F, B flat. So you get that thickness to the octave that I don't want to say is lacking on the Wes Montgomery, but just it's a different approach that Benson could add to it, and it gave it a little bit bluesier tone than just the straight octaves would, because it starts to fit into like a minor pentatonic type of scale, which maybe Wes didn't want to go into that approach for it since he was playing a lot more straight ahead jazz stuff. So anyways, I just want to point that out. There's a lot of good solos where Benson is doing that. There's a cool live one with him and Robin Ford where he plays that a lot, like over this like that kind of approach. So you guys can check that out as well. All right, let's keep going now. We're going to skip ahead again and get to this part where he's talking about what he learned from Jack McDuff. And so there's a few sections, this section in particular, where Benson drops a whole bunch of wisdom in a very short time period before getting into more stories and then later at the end as well. So you're going to want to stick around for that. So let's hear what he has to say about what he learned from Jack McDuff.
This is what Jack McDuff taught me. Comping, the word comp means compliment, Jack says.
So the word comping means compliment. Other people will also say it means like accompanying, but this gives you a sense of how we should think about it when we're backing up a soloist. Is it complimenting what they're doing? And let's keep listening because he's got a lot more to say about Jack McDuff.
I said, I never thought about that. I thought the guy was just hacking on the guitar. He said, oh man, copy, you complimenting. He said, yeah, he played this, you play that, make him sound better. Years later, that proved to be gigantic for me. Because records for the radio were 3-minute songs or less. You go over 3 minutes, everybody's mad at you if you're making a single. So when I got to New York, because Jack McDuff would cuss you out. If you wasn't playing nothing in your solo, he'd cut you off. We'd be playing a song. If you play a good first 8 bars or 12-bar blues, he let you play another one. Okay. And when it stopped being interesting, he cut you off. So it taught me how to heat up a song fast.
Here we go.
I didn't build no song. I heated it up instantly.
That is huge. So some of the advice that we always hear is about building a story or building up a solo. So it's really interesting to hear Benson talk about, from his experience with being in Jack McDuff's band, that he heats things up instantly. And I think that goes back to his whole approach with thinking about what is good for the audience and not necessarily him as a guitarist or as a musician. He's really focused on what the audience wants to hear, what's entertaining for them. He's definitely like the consummate entertainer. You can even tell from this interview. He loves telling stories and entertaining Beato. So that's cool. Benson's in a sense giving us permission that we can just kind of like go right for it and get to the good stuff without necessarily always having to feel like we're building a whole solo towards something. It's a little bit different approach than a lot of jazz guitarists, jazz musicians. He's has more of an approach of an entertainer than the traditional jazz musician. All right, one other thing here that I thought was like the most interesting thing.
Jump right on it. That's what Jack McDuff gave me. Right, and he taught me some other things. He said, George, he said, man, blues. I said, man, I'm tired of playing blues.
Can you imagine Benson saying he's tired of playing blues? To me, that is like mind-blowing. And when I heard that, my ear definitely perked up. And so this is really cool what Jack McDuff was telling him about.
Everything got to be blues. Everything. He said, Oscar Peterson plays blues. I said, well, I never thought about it. Yeah, he's a great player now. He said, man, when you play, you show some technique, show some class, play some pretty chords, some funky chords. Be sure and play some blues licks. He said, that's earth. You hitting very hard where they all live. Everybody comes out of the streets. So you hit bass when you hit the blues. Now then they begin to understand you. So you should put some blues in your music. I don't care what you play.
So to me, what Benson was describing that McDuff was telling him is who Benson is as a guitarist. He's saying, show some technique. I mean, it's Benson. Obviously, he's got technique. Show some class, like some pretty stuff. Benson is really known for playing a lot of pretty melodies and stuff in his soloing, and then play some blues. And that's like those three combination, to me, really defines what Benson sounds like as a guitarist. And it's interesting that that wasn't necessarily coming from him directly. It was Jack McDuff telling him, hey, this is how you should be approaching this, especially the blues part, because that's one of my favorite things about Benson, is no matter what you're hearing from him, he could be playing on the jazz standard Stella by Starlight, and he's still playing like the like bluesiest stuff over it right off the bat. And so that's super cool. He learned obviously a ton from McDuff, including like the essence of his approach as a guitarist. Let's skip ahead a little bit now and get to something that he learned from Quincy Jones.
And I heard something from the great Quincy Jones. I started an association with him because this was before we worked together, on a project. He said, George, years ago everything used to be a one-bar phrase. Now everything is a two-bar phrase. I didn't want to appear ignorant, so I didn't say anything. Till I got home, I said, the heck is the two-bar phrase? And then I was listening to a record by Rod Temperton. Boom, ba-dum, boom, bee-be-dum. Ba-ba-da, 2 bars. Boom, ba-dum, bee-be-da, 1 bar. Bee-be-da, 2nd bar. I said, oh. So on Broadway it was a 1-bar phrase because it went boom, boom. One next bar went boom, boom. Boom, boom. Boom, they say the neon like boom, boom. That's boring to me. So I changed it to boom, 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 boom. 2 bars.
I don't know why he's singing it slow, but yeah. And then he talks about how it's not just the rhythm of it, but also the articulation, how it's staccato.
Boom, boom, snap. Boom, boom, boom. And then I put staccato. Boom, 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 boom. Stack, boom. I said, oh yeah, okay, there we go. And that's when I got all of the
This is good too.
The flack from the band. Oh no, that won't work.
Can you imagine giving Benson flack about anything? Like, I want to know who is saying that.
I said, there's a reason why I'm standing up here in this band leader seat right here.
Yes, indeed.
I gotta keep us working, and this is how I do it. Do something different. The record came out and said, boom, straight to the top of the chart.
That's great. Benson obviously laid down the law on that one. All right, and then the last thing, we're going to skip ahead again. Right in the last 5 minutes of this interview, Benson again drops a ton of really important tips and knowledge for playing, so specific to the guitar. So let's jump ahead there. This is another part where Beato plays Benson a video from, I think, one of his instructionals or something, and Benson's just shredding through it. It's like a solo guitar thing. He sounds amazing. And Beato again is asking about how is he thinking about or coming up with those kind of ideas, on the fly, improvise. And this is what Benson has to say about that.
You have to think of it first and then figure out how you're going to approach it.
Yeah, so in this part, you have to think about it first and then figure out how you're going to approach it. So he talks a lot about like recalling stuff that he's learned from these jazz guitar greats. And that's what's difficult to him. And then he talks about other things that are important in improvising beyond just, the note part of it.
And to me, it has to swing. It's not just notes. All right.
So even what Benson's doing right here, this is an exercise that sometimes I share with my students that I learned from Barry Green, is that when we think about rhythms, you can do this in comping or in soloing, like what Benson's talking about. It really does help to sing out the rhythms and say them with like a passion, with articulation, and then try and capture that on your instrument. Not just thinking about a certain scale. That's not going to give you the sound and the feeling that you want your solo to have. So this is actually a really good exercise, just singing out the rhythm and the notes you're going to want to play.
Oh, that kind of thing. Like I would sing it. You got to make the guitar sing. That's hard to make these 6 strings do what that one voice can do.
But you're singing all the lead line that you're hearing in your head, and then you're putting all the harmony under it.
That's true. But to me, I always condense things down to its smallest point. My few students I've ever had asked me how to improvise. They said, well, man.
Here gets into it.
First, you have to learn the harmonies. What's possible? But I condense things down. See, they teach in school. I heard they teach in school. I don't know because I never went to a music school. That the world is made out of 4 chords: major, minors, augmenteds, and diminished chords. I condense those down to 2. So while they have to worry about 4, I only worry about 2. So that gives me an advantage. I can move faster, and I know I ain't got to search for nothing. Where's the 4th now? Where's the raised 5? I don't have to think about that. It's either major or minor, depending on where you're putting it and where.
So he doesn't really get into it. He says the two that he thinks about, major and minor, but he doesn't go into any other detail about his approach here. So if you guys want me to do a lesson on that, on what he's talking about here in detail, Benson calls it the secret of the 2 chords. Let me know in the comments, and I'll do a lesson on that. So let's see the last little bit that he has to say here.
The melody note is. The melody to me is the most important part.
Now, that's just critical advice for any musician, no matter what genre you're playing. The melody is the most important part. Obviously, Benson's going to think that based on just listening to how he plays, but it's not always the case with some musicians. So that is something to keep in mind.
On all of Charlie Parker's songs, you could always hum the melody.
I find that a little bit funny because I could see a bunch of Charlie Parker tunes that, at least for me, would be difficult to hum the melody on, but maybe not for someone like Benson. And the last thing I want to leave you guys with is this story at the end where Benson talks about how he saved the Count Basie orchestra. So let's just kind of skip to that.
Backstage to visit him, and I said, Mr. Basie, I wrote a song for you. I think you should at least hear it. Maybe you might like it. Play it. So I played it, and he said, oh, we're going to go in the studio and record that right away. And then he passed away before we were going. The band was breaking up. I said, no. Man, let's put this record down. And the money they made from the record allowed the band to stay together. So the Basie Orchestra continued because of that record, and which makes me happy and very proud that I played a part in keeping the band together.
Wow. So just even that, and you get a bunch of different stories throughout this interview of Benson's generosity and what role he played in other musicians' growth and just being able to do this music. So it's a really interesting way to end the interview. I'm super glad that Beato has done this and obviously shared this with all of us. It's amazing to hear. Definitely check it out. These stories are hilarious. You'll be going back to it for more. I hope you guys found it helpful for me to go through some of my main takeaways and lessons from this and how they might apply on guitar. If you guys want to check out some specific lessons from Benson, I'll link those below. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe. I do a bunch of lessons on Benson. I have a bunch on the channel. Hit like and leave me a comment so I know what you guys think. Hopefully I'll see you guys in another video. Thanks, guys. I'm going to go shed some Benson tunes now.